Hi there and welcome to Good Enough Scenery. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how I made this beautiful ruined building. Really pleased with how this turned out. I was given a vague brief from my friend who I made it for, who said he wanted a kind of ruined tower thing with a couple of stories, some places for archers to shoot out of, and this is what I came up with, and this is almost entirely made from XPS foam. So part one was the planning. So what I like to do if I'm making a building is draw it out to scale. So I did one side like that, and I did draw out the other side, and that's exactly to 1:1 scale, and then I had a 1:2 scale of what it looked like from above. Now for the walls, I chose to make them almost exactly as high as the bit of foam that I had. Now I've got this neat little arch made out of plastic that my friend designed and 3D printed for me for any archways that I want to do. So the first thing I did was to cut that out using my hot wire cutter. You could just as easily do it with a knife, but I've got a hot wire cutter, so I use it. And then I just started to cut this down to the size that I wanted it to be, and then cut it down to the thickness I wanted it to be, because I didn't need the walls to be 20mm thick. So cut it down, so I've got another piece available for another ruin if I make one in the future. And I just wanted to make sure that was to size, so near enough. Well, when I drew the archway, I knew it wasn't going to be exactly the same size as the one that I had. Now, when you draw it out to scale, it means that with your design, you can actually just lay it on top of the XPS foam, and then if you just press down slightly hard, then that goes through to the foam, and then you can just use your knife or your hot wire cutter to follow that along. So for the straight part, I use my hot wire cutter, just with the guide there, and then with the other parts, I kind of went to town a little bit, just going pretty much along the line. I think I've actually nailed that. Next up was to mark out where windows were on this particular piece. So I'm just holding up against my scale drawing and then marking where the windows should be. And then you'll see in a minute that I go down, down like that. And that does the verticals, and then I used it. I'm not sure if you're supposed to use it like that, but I did. And there we go. That's a window cut. And then running it through the hot wire cutter to do the vertical cut, and there we have a couple of bits in place. I need to cut down this one to size as well. And what am I doing here? I'll work it out in a minute. Oh, I'm just cut. Oh, yeah, I've also got some vertical supports. That's what I'm doing here, that joined the two walls together. So I'm cutting those down to the size that I want them to be. And I realised that as square things, they didn't look great. They looked too big and chunky, so I decided to change the shape of those. Not sure if I'm doing that instantly or in a minute. Nope, I'm carrying on with the walls here. So it's great when you do a voiceover afterwards. So one of the walls, the other wall, I decided I wanted to be a little bit more broken, so I just started carving into the other section of the wall that had been when I'd split it in half, and there we have the kind of the rough shape. Now for the floors, it's quite simple. Just hold your walls up against a bit of foam, and then you can get how big they need to be. Now for this one, I decided that I should have it made out of XPS foam as well, keep it nice and light, and I have foam to use up. But yeah, you could just as easily do it with MDF, but you'll see why I chose to do it with foam in a few minutes time. So yeah, cut out the floor shape and then split it so that it was nice and thin. I mean, it's just a few mil thick, and that's the basic design and shape there. And then the next floor up, just took the shape from the previous one and just made it that a little bit smaller, and then cut the thing in half again, and then made another the top floor, or the second floor if you will, and this is the one that's going to have stairs leading up to it, so I just used a knife. So you can use knives, not just hot wire cutters, but here I am using a hot wire cutter again, and that cut the hole for the stairs to go up. Now that's the shape, the new shape that I got for the uprights, which I feel like worked a lot better than being square. So I decided to do that. And now you're seeing me cutting off strips of the XPS foam, and you'll see me cutting bricks and stuff in a minute. Now, whenever you're doing this, I'd say don't say, oh, I need 5 of these. Just cut lots, because you're unlikely to actually, run out of foam realistically if you're just doing a building. So just make lots of them, because it's better to have way too many than have to go back a few steps and not have enough. So I just cut loads. These are the stairs that I'm cutting here, and just made sure I had enough by just making sure if I stack them on top of each other, that they were tall enough to go, and they were. Next up, I'm cutting some bricks, as you can see here, because I want to do some extra kind of bricky pieces for the battlements. And for these, I cut them 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre, and then 2 centimetres long. So they are all more or less the same shape. And like I said before, I haven't decided on an amount I want to cut. I've just cut lots. Now, I tried to do something a little bit fancy here. So I've got this this little tool which holds square things at a 45-degree angle for going through my hot wire cutter. You could do it with a knife, but essentially I'm cutting these square pieces that have been flattened off at one edge, which I decided were going to be used as part of the battlements. I mean, I've cut about 15 there. I think I only ended up using 5 or 6, but we'll see. Next up, cutting the windows. So I'd already had a window on one piece, so I just held that bit of foam on top of the other, just so I could mark out the window nice and easily, much quicker than doing measurements. But sometimes you do have to do them by measurements, which is just tough luck, unfortunately, but it means it ends up looking better. So I cut out this bottom window there. And again, rather than measuring, just line that up with the bit of foam there, and then marked out the window. And then you see that all of these are now cut out. So that was all of the windows done. And now it's on to adding details. Now, if you're using this blue foam, then it has a kind of this sheen to it, which you quite simply have to sand off. Otherwise, this doesn't take paint very well. So I sanded it off, and then I rolled a bit of tin foil on all of the walls to give random indentations and make it look a bit more stony. And then I cut in at random angles with a knife to kind of make the bricks look a bit less like they were cut using a hot wire cutter, just adding some random variation to them. But yeah, did that on all of the bits of floor and all of the walls as well. Here I'm now making planks, which is just taking the XPS foam and dragging a wire brush down, or you can use a comb, and that creates these kind of lines down it, and then cutting off some random pieces which make it look like broken wood, which we use for the floor a bit later on. Now this is the ground floor here, and this is the main reason I made it out of foam. Now I've got this cobblestone roller, so if you can get one of these. I mean, I think I paid about £10 for it, because I know I'm going to use it, and just rolled it across it, and it creates cobblestone effect really, really quickly, and you'll see just how awesome that looks later on. Now for the other floors, I did 2 centimetre square tiles. And I carved these in using, I think that's a donate blood card that I had in my wallet, just to, so you're not cutting into it with a knife and risking cutting through it. You're not using a biro. I'm just using the edge of that, and that's what the 3 floors ended up looking like. And then carrying on the adding of the details, using the a credit card or whatever to add lines onto stonework and onto the uprights here, just so they look like block work. Now this is the most time-consuming bit of the whole build. This is adding the brickwork to all of the walls. So I'm doing 1 centimetre gaps, which I'm using the grid lines on my mat to guide me with, but doing that across, and then doing 2 centimetre bricks, and this is eyeballed, then kind of bisecting them the next layer up. And you can just use a ruler here, so you've got them all in a line, and just kind of scoring out every other brick like that, and you can do that across the whole thing. And then once you've done them in biro, in pen, with a knife, I then go over it with a biro, and you can cut them out to add a bit more detail. I didn't do a lot of that, to be perfectly honest, and it ends up looking like that a little while later on. Now you can line this up, one up with the other, so you can easily put your grid lines in for the next one. Now I've got some little brick pieces here, and I've just literally just super glued these around the edge of the door frame, just to add an archway, so it looks a bit more like a door perhaps would. So just little, they're not quite square, slightly off square, and just adding them in as they fit, and it ended up looking like that, which I then later rolled with a bit of foil as well to make them more bricky. Onto the painting. So all of the planks and woods and stuff, I just used a bit of burnt umber mixed with I think a little bit of black, but not a lot. That's not poo on my hands, that is paint. But it's completely covering all of the planks like that. And then with all of the stonework, I've used just a light grey. Now I like to do this with a two brush technique, which I don't know, I haven't seen anywhere else. But you have a big brush to kind of do coverage, then a little brush to kind of go into the details that you might need to, and it means you tend to get less paint on your hands. So if you're not using one, or you're using one and holding the other. Now what I'm showing you here is there are some parts that you just simply don't need to paint because they are going to be stuck down, so don't bother painting them. Now I've got some lolly sticks here, and I'm breaking them off with pliers, and this is for the underneath of the floors, because I'm trying to make it as kind of realistic as possible. And then once I'd had them and kind of broken them and left some of them half broken, I just painted them with the same color paint that I had left over. So yeah, nothing particularly complicated there. I didn't even measure them or anything, just completely randomly cut out or snipped lolly sticks so that they were going to be useful for later on. I think I had a whole bunch left over, but like I said earlier, better to have left over than need more. Then on the floor here, I used just a dark wash, which I made up myself. So it ended up looking like that. And then I went over all of it with this dark wash as well, just because with this, especially with this blue foam, you might get away with another type of foam, but the blue foam, you do need a couple of coats on it. And then I dry brushed it with a light grey, which didn't really show up very well in this video, but I dry brushed the whole thing. Onto the construction now, and nothing particularly complicated here. I just use a glue gun. I just got a cheap glue gun from Amazon. So there's a link to buying that if you want to. And putting these down, and these are the floor height up from the just a smidge up from the floor. So I use the floor height to put them into position. So just putting them horizontally in line and then moving them vertically up by nudging them with the floor, and I did that across all things. And this wasn't something I'd originally planned to do, but because I'd made so many of these things, I had a bunch left over for it. I think that will look cool and it will add some extra support. Now actually gluing it to the floor, this is quite simple. Just put some hot glue on there, trying to be as neat as possible, and then trying to form as good a 90-degree angle as possible, but the 90 will be helped a little bit later on. Then adding on one side, again, just gluing the bottom of the things there, and then the end of it as well, and then holding up. And you are going to end up with a gap between them on the corners, but that we filled in a minute using these ones here. So these uprights, this is what's going to really make it a lot stronger, and it's going to make your make your uprights be uprights, 90-degree angles, and this is what it ended up looking like at this stage, which I think already looks pretty cool. Then I decided to do something a little bit time consuming, but I think it was worth it with the inside of the floor. So I took some light grey and randomly painted some of the cobblestones. Then I changed to a different colour, so we went to a brown, and then I did exactly the same thing with a more of a beige colour, and then I kind of started blending some of the paint colours together as well, but it's randomly painted stones and ended up looking like that. And once it was dry, I went over it with the black wash. I'm really pleased with how this floor ended up looking. Really glad that I did that. Now for the first floor, I this is completeness. I could have just glued that concrete slab thing to the, and it would have been absolutely fine, but I wanted to make it look a bit more realistic. So I glued some lolly sticks underneath just with the hot glue gun to show that the tiles are actually supported, and then turned that over, and then using the rafter type shapes that I'd cut, I glued them on as rafters to be holding those things up, which I think is pretty much how a floor is actually made. I had to make a couple of adjustments just so that the lolly sticks fit into the rafters, and it all kind of looked like it should look, but it ended up looking a little something like you'll see in just a second. And there we go. And that looks like a collapsed floor from my point of view. And just to add a bit more detail, and the fact that half of this floor is going to be taken up with stairs, I decided to add some fallen beams as well, as a way for minis to get from one part of it to the other. You'll see why in a minute. Now for the stairs, I just glued a whole bunch of these things on top of each other. and that was all it needed to be doing. And then I took one of the rafter type beams and I added that to the side of the stairs and then cut it off at a 45-degree angle so that it was perfect for the side. Now putting it all together, so took a long rafter type thing and glued that at the height of one of the bricks, so that's the brick above the door, so it's nice and easy to get that straight, and then did the same at each of the sides, so that this is going to be holding the first floor up. Not the best camera work here, but just putting glue all along the top edge of the supporting rafters, and then because it's all been cut to the right size, it's just a case of holding that in place until the glue set, which with a hot glue gun doesn't take very long. And I really love how that looks. It actually looks like a floor could actually look. Not that anyone's ever going to look at it from that angle. Either way, I was pleased with it. Then to finish off the stairs here, just adding the beam onto the side. Splooge, and then doing the same thing I did with the lower floor with this this top floor by just having the rafters there to hold up the floor. Come on, Chris, get on with it. Come on. There we go. Right, then I glued the stairs into place. So put some glue on the edge of the stairs and I think on the bottom of the stairs as well, and then put them into the correct position. Then I did the same thing I did with the first floor design with the second floor, just by adding on a couple of lolly sticks and a couple of rafters, just because I feel like if the first floor was like that, then the second floor should look like that as well. And I was pretty happy with how that looked, so then I glued it down, which looks like this. Ta-da! So a majority of the construction done now. So let's moving on to the outer details, and this is where you can kind of have a bit of fun, meaning that none of this is actually compulsory. I mean, you don't have to make it at all. But I just took some of the strips that I'd made and extra stone bits and just added them on as side pieces. And then for the battlements, what I did was take these little blocks I'd made and then I alternated them with these kind of flattened off squares. And you can see what I'm going for here. So every other one was a spiky stone, and then I realized that the floor would collapse completely if there was nothing underneath it, so I decided to build up a ruined wall at that end there, partly for the aesthetics and partly because there was literally nothing holding up that end bit of foam. And that is this construction complete. That is the finished thing in terms of construction, and I was pretty damn delighted with how it ended up looking. But there's always some final details to add in. So to start off with, I put some glue down on the floor, and because I knew the flock that had been used on the board that it was going on, I used the same flock on the edge of the floor, so that it would be a more seamless transition between the gaming board and the bit of scattered terrain. Then I added some moss at one side just by covering a part of it in some glue, and then taking this kind of dark, chunky, I think it's called coarse scatter. Never really know how to put it on, but I put it on like that, and I was fairly happy, and then sealed it in place with some spray glue. Then I used the same glue on the edge here to add some moss along the ledge thingy. I don't know what that's called. I'm not an architect, but the bit I'm covering in glue, that's where I put the glue. And then putting some moss on there as well. And the very final, my very favourite thing that I did with this was the other wall, which we'll see in just a second. So with all of them, kind of hold it in place with a spray. But yeah, this wall here, put a load of glue down, and then I took some greeny fallen leaves and some yellowy fallen leaves, and basically I took it, kind of alternated sprinkling one and then the other to kind of build up the idea of some sort of ivy or something growing up this corner here. So put a whole chunk on, then I sprayed it with the spray glue just to kind of set it extra, but that also forms a bit of an extra layer of glue to adhere to. So I put a few more leaves down in some places, and then finish that off. And then the final bit of scatter I put in, and just in random places around mainly around like the edges where I felt for like there may have been some rocks fallen and stuff. I took this light grey stone flock and just sprinkled it in a few places. And then the whole thing was then coated in more spray just to hold all of that flock in place. And having just seen it about a month after making it, all that flock's still in place. And then the final thing I did with it is use some Euphonium camouflage just to add some kind of greeny, grimy texture. I mean, arguably I could have gone over this with a full brown wash, some more green wash or whatever. But you know, you do it until you're happy with it, and at that point you're done. And that was the completed thing. This is probably the most detailed building I have ever made. It's obviously it's not huge, but it's massively detailed. I really love how it turned out. I think my friend who I made it for absolutely delighted with it. You can see it on the game board there, and kind of flows into it nicely. And yeah, all of the details I was really happy with. So if you like this, then please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when more videos are coming up, and leave me your comments. Let me know what you think about this ruined building, and I'll catch you for another video soon.